Good morning and welcome to the first of these 5 seminars where we're going to take a look at the unique aspects of running a family-owned business. we are running quite to time because the presentation aspect of it is going to take about 40 minutes or so, and then we want to get as much Q&A in and interaction and engagement as we possibly can. So I'll speed through the introductions. But as Helen was saying, my name's Tony Lockwood. I'm an operating partner within the professional services firm Gunnar Cook. And across the OP and legal practices of over 300 partners now, we have extensive experience of working alongside owners of family businesses at all stages of their evolution. And this experience has really led us to identify 5 core areas where family-owned businesses differ from non-family businesses. And it's these differences that we're going to look to explore within these seminars. Just to give you an overview of the 5 areas before we go into each one individually. The 5 are profitability and growth. That's very much focused around, profitability and growth is important to all businesses. But as a family business, as the family grows, the demands on the business grow to fund the family moving forward. And it's very prevalent in second and third generation businesses, where the increase in number of family members dependent upon the business to fund their lifestyle obviously increases significantly. And that's the area of the webinar today that we'll go into in a little while. The second of the 5 areas is succession. So again, and we're doing a webinar in a couple of weeks' time on that, and that's very much again focused upon not just succession of the senior person, but how do you introduce family members into the business, especially when you've got non-family members in leadership roles at the moment, and what potential challenges and conflicts does that create? And again, what does good look like in terms of managing that succession process? Excuse me. The third area is strategy and vision. Again, you could argue that strategy and vision are very relevant for all businesses, but again, it's the dynamic between, does the vision of the family align to the vision of the business? And what we find, especially in as family businesses grow and second and third generation get involved, it can start to splinter away. The family want to go, one part of the family might want to go one way, and the business is going the other way, and that can create conflict. And managing that process and ensuring that you keep aligned is critical. The fourth area is that managing that conflict, and again, conflict within business is pretty standard. But when it's within a standard business, then you can deal with it. You've got HR processes, you've got usual sort of disciplinary processes to deal with it. When the family's involved and it can migrate over to the dinner table or to family gatherings, that can be very divisive and often causes organisations and businesses to fail because of that inherent conflict. And the final area, the fifth one, which I think is we'll get into beginning of May for the final one, looks at governance. And again, we know there's a massive an increased focus now on company governance, and it's becoming a much bigger issue and much more important, and much more sort of emphasis being placed upon getting corporate governance right. But again, from a family perspective, what we find is that in many cases, there's a family governance process and a business governance process. And again, making sure that those are aligned is critical. But we'll talk about that in the fifth one. All of these are intrinsically tied together, and I'm sure as we go through each session, we'll stray into the other areas and start talking about elements. But I thought it was worthwhile just sort of painting the whole picture before jumping into the first session. As I said at the start, these sessions are aimed to be as interactive as possible. We don't just want to present stuff to you. We want to engage. We want to start getting stories out, because I think it's the stories that really bring the sort of sweet spot into all of this. Understanding how other family-owned businesses have dealt with certain issues can open up a lot more insight than just us telling you what good looks like. So we'll try to introduce as many of those stories as possible, and feel free as we go through this, although there'll be certain elements of where we invite questions, but if there's points that you want to raise your hand or put a note in the chat box, and we'll definitely come back to you and start talking about your specific experiences and stories. If you can't make all the sessions, Helen's going to be recording it, and we'll share the edited version of on video after the event. I say edited because what we want to make sure is that you as an individual get the maximum value. So there may be stuff that you want to talk, or you'd be open to talk about in a small group like this, but would be less so if it was out in the public domain. So if that is the case, if we talk about something that you're not comfortable with, let us know. We'll edit it out before we release the video. So without further ado, let's move on to the first session. As I said earlier, the first of these sessions is going to focus upon profitability and growth. And we'll start to consider the sort of 7 ways that you can drive revenues across your business. And the session's going to be run, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Julie Brooke, Tim Parrock, and Jed Lee, who are regional directors of the Marketing Centre, and they'll lead this next session. I'll let them explain more, but very briefly, we're going to take you through a process that highlights the 7 levers that you have within your business that can help increase revenues and profitability across the business. So, as I say, enjoy it, get involved, and if you've got any questions, raise your hand or put them in the chat box, and we'll make sure we'll cover them off either during the session or at the end of the session. So Julie, Jed, do you want to take over?
Thanks, Tony. I'll just share my screen.
Yep.
Hopefully you can see that, everyone.
Yeah.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our guide to the growth levers webinar this morning. I'm Julie Brooke, as Tony said, and thank you for that introduction, Tony. I'm the Regional Director for the Northwest for the Marketing Centre, and I'll be presenting today's session with my colleague Tim Parrock. Tim, are you there?
I am here. I'm well, as Tony and Julie have introduced me, I don't really need to say very much more. I'm the Regional Director for down here in the Southeast
Sure.
for the Marketing Centre. So.
Great. So today we're going to introduce you to the main growth levers that you could be focusing on for better revenue generation and lead generation within your business. We're going to take roughly 40 minutes to go through the levers, and after that, hopefully we're going to have some discussion as well afterwards, and we'll have some time to do that if we haven't finished much of the discussion during the session. So please do keep your videos on. It makes us feel less like we're sitting in a room talking to ourselves, which is the first sign of madness. And we hope we'll keep the noise to the minimum. I can't guarantee that my dog won't bark, or we might get another Amazon delivery, which is happening a lot at the moment. If you want to pop any questions in the chat, then please do. And as Tony said, we'll pick those up as we go through at various points. Sorry, let's just move back. So let's move on. We recently ran a series of webinars last year for small to medium-sized businesses when we used several polls like this. When asked what the priorities were for business owners, lead generation came out top in all of the sessions that we ran. So basically, you all seem to think you need more leads to generate growth, and almost to the exclusion of just about everything else. But the real questions we've been asking ourselves at the Marketing Centre are, do you really want more leads more than anything else? Do you know exactly how many leads you need? And do you even really know the answers to those questions as well? So let's find out. So here's a short exercise to warm your brains up today before we get into the main session. If a business is at 5 million turnover this year, wants to grow by 20% next year with an average deal size of 500,000, and their lead conversion currently sits at 33%, how many leads does the marketing activity need to generate in order to achieve that target? Now, I'm going to give you a minute to work that out. Please do pop your answers into the chat once you've had a think about it. This is where we could do the Krypton factor music, really. And
I could hum it. Except I don't know it, so it's not possible.
No, I know. Music maestro.
We won't hold it against you, folks. It's a simple question. Oh.
Oh. So is that enough time, Tim?
Well, we're getting an indication, but at least 6, but depends how many customers they lose. Well, that's true. Off you go, Julie. Let's put
yeah, I think that's enough time. So there are a few ways of reaching your answer, and they might be like this. 6 new leads with a deal size of 500,000 and based on our conversion rate of 33%, we would need 6 leads to achieve 2 wins, amounting to 1 million turnover, additional turnover. This kind of example would really probably work well for a subscription-based business where most of the revenue is through repeat custom, and we just need to find new customers to plug the gap. You may have come up with 36 new leads. If overall we need £6 million worth of revenue, assuming no retained business, so this could be a manufacturing business or a business where there isn't high repeat custom, then we would look at the total revenue required, divide that number by the number of 500k deals we need to win, in this case 12, and times that number by the conversion rate of 33%. Alternatively, you may already be an alternative thinker, and in which case you came up with 0. And you may have decided that all is required is to raise your prices and increase our average deal size instead. So which of these 3 did you come up with, 6, 36 or 0? The answer is that you're all correct, and you are well on your way to recognising that whilst lead gen is extremely important, it's not the only lever you have to play with when increasing your revenue. Over the last 10 years of working with small to medium-sized and family businesses, typically 1 day a week, our team of expert part-time marketing directors have developed a highly commercial approach to marketing because we work with businesses over a length of time and get to see the results through as well. We have our own unique way of thinking about marketing, which we call our Marketing 360. And the scope of this is well beyond simple lead gen or the creation of just a website. We see marketing as a strategic function that is connected to the business goals to drive profitable revenue growth. We use this framework, which we call our Marketing 360, with all the businesses that we work with, and it guides our approach. And we have also an online marketing health check based on this framework, which enables business owners to assess how they're doing with their marketing and to prioritise areas to address. Now, the focus for today's webinar is on profitable revenue growth, as Tony said earlier. So we're going to focus on understanding some key numbers, the role that marketing has in driving revenue growth. We'll also share some key observations about common pitfalls that we see many businesses fall into, which we hope you can avoid. We'll introduce our 7 levers and show you their power with a couple of really useful examples. But we also want to be practical, so we'll also give you some takeaways to consider after each of the levers. And to set your expectations, you can expect a focus purely on marketing today, and the more financial aspects that you would require, perhaps an FD's input, debtor days, payment days, profit and cash flow management, or growth by acquisition, which are other ways of growing your revenue, obviously, we're not covering those today. So, are you in best shape at the moment? Can you quantify each key contributor to your revenue targets this year? Do your internal systems provide trustworthy data to help you forecast? And do your internal processes maximize the likelihood of your activity turning to revenue? Do you have clear executable plans to bring in the different elements of revenue? And does your marketing team or agencies have the commercial insight to make the right priorities in their plans? It's really tough out there for any business right now, and it's not getting any easier. Now, more than ever, it's really imperative to be able to answer these questions positively and develop a slightly more scientific approach to your marketing. And we're here to help that. So by now, I'm sure you're wondering just what are these 7 levers. So let's get right into the 7 levers of growth one by one. We're going to look at this in the context of new versus existing customers, since businesses derive revenue from a mix of both. And the first question to ask really is, what's your mix? Can you put accurate numbers on it? And do you monitor this? And to be brutally honest, we really believe strongly that you should. Do you have a marketing plan that includes the nurturing and development of your relationship with existing customers? Or are you only spending time on marketing to new prospects? And if so, that's almost certainly an error. How can you achieve growth across both of these customer bases? So, number 1 is lead generation. Obviously, this is the most obvious one. Your current marketing programs may include using a combination of email, web, or pay-per-click, amongst others, to create your own demand generation activity. And at the same time, the sales team will drive their lead gen activities, possibly through LinkedIn, outbound calling, or networking. Both work side by side to create new opportunities to fill the lead funnel. Number 2 is distribution channels. Many businesses work through various channels to generate business for them. So that's the creation of demand by others, basically. And this might be through agents, distributors, resellers, integrators, or partnerships, depending on what sector you operate within. Typically, we need to give up some margin for this and to support them with marketing materials, but this investment should be outweighed by the incremental revenue. Number 3 is referrals, and asking happy customers for introductions to other businesses or potential customers in their network is an easy source of revenue. Often it's just being brave enough to ask the question. Retention, the one area that never came up as a priority in our recent webinars, was a focus on keeping customers. Do you know how long your customers stay with you, or have flags in place to alert you when they change their buying habits from you? Keeping customers longer means more revenue, so it's an obvious place to focus some of our effort. Number 5 is cross-sell and upsell. Deepening the relationship we have with customers so they buy more from us more regularly, as well as making them aware of the other products and services we provide, such as perhaps maintenance, upgrades, adjacent products, again, depending on what sector you're in. All those things can actually increase revenue fairly easily. Number 6 is pricing. When did you last increase your prices, or perhaps even decrease your prices? This could be the easiest way to increase revenue. Whilst decreasing prices may well affect your profitability, the increased volume of revenue generated sometimes could then make up for this too. And then finally, number 7 is marketing and sales efficiency, ensuring that more of your responses and leads convert to revenue, and as quickly as possible, can have a significant impact on growth too. So there are the 7 levers, and having talked about those, in a moment I'm going to hand over to Tim, who is going to show us how to apply these levers to a couple of businesses that we've worked with. But before we do that, are there any questions in the chat that we should address, Tim?
Or Jed even?
Jed?
Yeah, somebody's asking, I think you mentioned the Marketing 360, Julie, when we, I think in your opening discussions, somebody's asking, is there any more information about that? What I'll do is I'll drop a link to that into the chat that everyone can access. Maybe you just want to explain, Julie, what that is?
Yeah, okay. Well, we have a link on our website that you can access to do an online health check for marketing in your business. And it takes about 10 minutes to do. And once you've completed that, you get a free report back that gives you a number of scores. It gives you an overall marketing maturity score, but it also gives you scores in different areas as well, based on our framework.
Cool.
Okay, does that answer the question? Any more questions? Anyone else like to comment on anything at this stage?
No, all silent.
No, all silent. So Tim, let's move on. You take it away, and we'll have a look at some ways of using this in businesses.
Am I sharing my screen, or have you got to let me?
Yeah.
Have you got it? It's up there, is it?
Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, if you stop sharing, then they should see mine. Let me know if it's up there.
It is there.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Julie's taken that so far. What we thought we'd do now is give you a real world example. And Astral estimation software is the, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of something up at the top, but still. Astral estimation software is supposed to be staying on that page. They're a service provider. We've changed the name, by the way, so don't bother looking them up on the net or anything, because we have to protect the innocent. They're a service provider run by a husband and wife team that provides specialist software to architects and surveyors. This they do on a largely monthly subscription basis. So most of their revenue is recurring, if you remember Julie mentioning the difference between subscription-based and one-off sales. When we started working with them, they had around about 175 clients, various subscription packages, and they'd grown this client base with some marketing support, but largely through referral and just becoming very embedded within their customers' businesses. So they were keen to change gear. They brought in already a senior sales director. So you remember Tony mentioning earlier on the difference between a family run business and then when you bring outsiders in, the stresses and strains that creates. And sure enough, this senior sales director was looking at targets and trying to drive the business towards the overall intention of getting them to be in a position to sell in about 5 years. So he'd come in comfortable with getting some significant growth, to be fair, but wasn't confident of being able to achieve their overall goal, which was growing from 4 million to 7 million within about 18 months. They were grown up enough, though, to realize that they needed some experienced marketing support in order to do that. So the first thing that they did, or that we did actually, was to get into their CRM system, get that working properly, and tie it into the financial system so that you could actually link everything together. And that meant that we could get some meaningful data out of their systems and use them to plan. So that's about 6 months' work, really, as we went there. And from there, we then went through 3 simple steps. First was understanding how the revenue was generated in the first place, so how it currently came in through the door. And we looked at all of those growth levers that Julie mentioned, excuse me, to understand their current impact and how it was influencing the revenue generation as a whole. Then we looked at what was reasonable to expect from the existing activity, and obviously that was the sales director's input, but largely that was driven from a marketing perspective in terms of lead generation. And then we worked through the rest of the levers to see how we could bridge the revenue gap that we could see. So this is nice and clear at the moment. Let me explain where we are. This is the first stage, really, and this is where we gained real clarity. And we did this by using a waterfall analysis. Some might have heard it called a revenue bridge. To be honest, semantics aside, it doesn't really matter. It's just an excellent way of understanding the revenue requirements, breaking them down, and then identifying ownership of the component parts. So on the vertical axis over here, we have the revenue, the turnover and sales. Along the bottom, the marketing levers, and these are split between new and existing customers there. And then on the right-hand side, we have the total section where we can already see that rather ambitious target of 7 million. Then we went through each of the individual levers to identify where the revenue was going to come from. Astral could see 1.5 million, roughly, coming from lead generation activity. And we'll look into that again in a little bit more detail in the second stage. And they then had a fairly nascent channel strategy, likely to pull in, we felt, about £500,000 worth. So that takes us up to 2 million, and you'll notice over here that as I add these, the forecast is building up a little bit. By analysing their CRM system, we were able to see that it was quite reasonable to anticipate just some improvements from the CRM. We could add 250,000 there, and then from the deals that were already in the pipeline, we put a value to them according to their likelihood of closing at that stage, and obviously then added a level of new churn, because particularly in the software business, you get some people coming on board and then leaving again. It's really important you put that in as well. Now, we mentioned that Astral had good recurring revenue, and here we can see that a little less than half of their income was already, if you like, in the bank from existing customers under subscription. And better still, we knew that there was an opportunity to sell upgrades to some of these people. But again, and inevitably, there'd be an element of churn from customers who decided to leave them for whatever reason. And having gone through this exercise, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that the total of that amount was 5.8 in terms of their forecast. And that leaves a gap of 1.2 million to the target that they had identified as needing in order to achieve their long-term objectives. So, as you can imagine, going through this exercise helps stimulate lots of helpful, we'll call it helpful discussion, lots of discussion anyway, and way beyond just the demands to sell harder. There was also a realization, I think, that the target was challenging and that specific plans were needed for each of the elements. So fundamentally, they all realized that the lead generation activity expected to account for 1.5 million of that 7 million. This is quite a big ask. So let's look at that in greater detail. What we're going to do now is just consider the pipeline itself. So to better understand that lead gen ask, it's a case of how you break lead generation down in real quantifiable terms. And this really is just a simple pipeline funnel. So from their financial system, Astral could tell us that on average, a client spent around 23,000 with them each year. Simple maths, i.e. dividing 1.5 million by 23,000, said they'd need to win 64 new customers. Now, historically, a quarter of the qualified leads that the sales team worked on would come good. So they needed to be working on 4 times that amount, about 260 thereabouts, 260 qualified leads to take those 64 wins. And going back one stage further in the lead generation funnel, we knew that only 1 in 5 responses generated by the marketing team would be progressed to those qualified leads. So that's the benefit of having your systems working and linked in, or linked together, should I say. So that meant, with roughly 1,300 leads or 1,300 responses in the year, they would get somewhere towards that. So to run through that the other way, just for clarity. By using marketing, such as whatever it might be, email, website, social media, I guess, Astral could create 1,286 responses, and of these, 20% would go through to become qualified leads, and of those, 25% of those would become actual wins. Now, this is at the top end of what the sales and marketing team, or in particular the sales director, felt they could achieve. They pretty much maxed out the available databases that they could access. They didn't feel that increasing the frequency of comms would make much difference. So how else could we bridge the gap? And it's time to look at all of those other 7 levers. As we're looking at this in real terms, with actual figures, we're going to move over to a different environment, and you're going to quite quickly recognize Excel, that dreadful thing. So we're going to move over to a spreadsheet environment. And consider this this activity in a little bit more detail. So here's that spreadsheet. No, it's not. I've just done the wrong share.
Somebody sent a question in, Julie, or Tim. Maybe you can answer while Tim gets that over. Where does new product development fit in terms of a revenue source that's not on the 7 levers? You're on mute, Julie.
Sorry, really good question. And I think it's the answer to that really is that it's kind of catered for in the levers, because if you have a new product, you will sell it through your existing and new customers generally, and also upsell, cross-sell, that type of approach too. So really good question, but it is kind of covered in that model.
Thanks.
Okay. So just to outline here, you'll recognize the waterfall. It looks a little different to what we were looking at before, but I'm just going to orientate you around this page here. So on the right, you can still see that shape of the waterfall, and the levers shown along the bottom here. On the left, you can see the figures that builds up that waterfall, and the sharp-eyed amongst you may even have spotted that we've got pricing and marketing and sales efficiency over here. So I'm now going to focus on this 1.2 million shortfall that we have. And in order to do that, I'm going to clear away some of the clutter and move to a slightly different environment. So to give you the heads up on this, in this sheet, we're going to look through the levers and consider some what ifs. This is where we asked how could we bridge that 1.2 gap, what was possible. So on the left here, you can see the 7 levers that Julie's talking about. And then in the baseline column here, you can see the figures that we've already identified in our forecast. The optimized column is the pink cells. This is where we have the opportunity to modify the figures in line with discussions and try some what ifs. And then in the next column, that gives us the results, or at least the anticipated results. The box on the right simply captures these and then shows the cumulative effect. So the first thing we did was look at lead generation. It's always the first port of call. We discussed whether we could get much more from the lead generation program with new customers in particular. And as we know, the team felt that the plan to create nearly 1,300 responses as it stood was a bit of a stretch. We would need to almost double that figure in order to bridge the gap that we were talking about, and we were not confident of really being able to make any impact on that at all. It would have required a massive investment, probably a complete reinvestment in brand values and some very expensive advertising to support all of that, and it simply wasn't likely to work. So we decided to look at the alternative levers. And the first place we went to was retention. They weren't doing badly. 2.5 years in terms of a relationship with a customer is not bad. But they knew that there were other people in the business in similar areas who were getting more than that. So we felt that if we worked pretty hard at things, we could actually apply a customer service team or as a customer success team, if you like, we could probably get that up to something like 3 years in terms of the relationships, and that's going to increase the amount of income by almost £750,000. That's a significant contribution. Cross-sell and upsell also. We knew that if we revised our subscription tiers and we focused really hard on selling customers up to the next tiers, the customer success managers, again, obviously had a major role to play here. So we felt that we could increase the average value of our relationships to about £30,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's correct. And again, you've got over £250,000 in terms of contribution there. Excuse me. We also looked at our processes, marketing and sales efficiency. Could we improve the sales and marketing processes? And of course, that's the value of bringing an experienced sales director in, because he'd looked at that. And then as we were on board and improving their marketing processes there, we were talking about a response to qualified lead originally of about 20%. It really shouldn't have been very difficult for us to improve that and take that up to, say, 22%. And then a 1% improvement in the conversion level at a later stage would take that up to 26. So a small improvement there. And you've got £200,000 worth of contribution. So you can see that we've changed not a great deal. What we've done is we've invested in a customer service team which has the ability to improve services and processes across the board. Small changes, but actually we've more than covered that £1.2 million shortfall. So what did we learn? Small changes, massive impact. And also, incidentally, importantly, that those impacts and those improvements that we're making would be long lasting and really genuinely sustainable. So Astral, remember, very high recurring business, but let's look at a different environment. I'm going to tell you about Franklin Formats, and again, we've changed the name, but it's a genuine organization. This business is a business which supplies steel coverings for large buildings, especially roofs and cladding for industrial and commercial buildings. The original founder had passed the business down to his 3 children about 10 years before we got involved. But only the current managing director was operational in the business, and he'd grown it to about £11 million worth in revenue. Now, it was obvious that he built a great reputation. They had a very, very high conversion rate of inquiries, which I'll show you in a minute. But understandably, their clients didn't buy new roofs every 5 minutes. So growth was somewhat erratic, and they had to keep generating new business every year, both directly and through distribution. And our challenge was to profitably grow that revenue to 12 million, which wasn't in itself a massive ask. But importantly, to establish disciplines and processes whereby we could guarantee, or almost guarantee, a reliable growth pattern in order to maximize the business's value from an ongoing point of view. So let's move to Franklin Formats revenue bridge. And you can see immediately how the profile is completely different to what we were looking at a moment ago for Astral. So on the right in the total section, we can see the 650k gap between forecast up here and down there, the 650k gap between forecast and target. And you can also see how lead generation here on the left at 6 million is so much more important for them. They're far more transactional in their business model than Astral was. And if we look at their pipeline funnel, we can see that their conversion rates were, well, frankly, astonishing. Really, really strong. It's the reputation that they had and the industry knowledge that they possessed. So a lot of people would call that brand, and that's the holy grail for marketers. If you look at their pipeline, In order to hit 6 million in terms of that lead generation target, based on previous experience, they'd need 143 initial marketing responses, which they would qualify down into 71 leads, which is a 50% success rate, which is fantastic, and then convert these into 50 wins, which is a 70% success rate. So they managed to get a sizable number of wins from a very small volume of inquiries. I know a lot of people who would give their absolute eye teeth for that, and it was a really interesting exercise from our perspective. So I'm now going to show you what we did with them. Their models were good. We knew where their revenue was likely to come from, and it was time to see how we could achieve more. So we had our additional revenue target of 650k, if you remember, and it was time to work through all of those levers. So first up, once again, is lead generation, and you can see that if I change that to 159, we've made 600, well, almost 700,000. The problem was the economic environment at the time, a little while ago. It was already tough, getting tougher, and indeed their pipeline was showing stress as we spoke. So I'm going to convert that back. They had an almighty climb ahead in order to hit their current lead generation targets of 143 marketing responses. So let's be kind to them. So where else did we look? Where else could we go? And the first port of call, really, through our own network, was the distribution channel. The marketing centre, in case you don't know, we work with about 250 businesses around the country. And it really was just a case of putting in all calls out and referring within our group of marketing directors. We were pretty confident that there would be 2 new distribution deals from that source, which could quite rapidly add, £250,000 to their distribution channel. So I'll bring that up there. We parked referrals and retention as the effort to reward ratio there just wasn't there. But cross-sell and upsell, on the cross-selling front, we could at least see some good success with some minor product adjustments to current customers and additional promotional marketing to lapsed customers, which was largely overlooked, actually. We felt we could raise the average annual order value by £20,000 and move that up to 140,000 in terms of average order value. And then pricing. We discussed pricing, both an increase and a decrease, but given their strong market position, their strong brand values, we felt that a 3% price increase would have minimal negative effect. And of course, £340,000 is quite a strong contribution. There would be a level of churn. When you put your prices up, you're bound to have some sort of churn. But we felt that because of their good relationships and the fact that they were so strong in the market, we could probably get away with just a 0.5% of churn there. So you've still got £300,000 worth of contribution. And guess what? That holy grail, we've actually made, if everything went according to plan, £700,000, which covers the revenue gap and gets us to our target. So you've got 2 examples there. Again, in this case, small changes having big impact. Which levers? I think I've hopefully demonstrated it differs in terms of what works best from company to company. But what you have to remember, of course, is that this is only a what-if analysis. This is a planning tool. We've barely touched on how we would actually achieve this, and that's really where our marketing directors, or where your marketing efforts need to go, where the marketing 360 process comes in. And I'm going to hand back to Julie now, who will give you a few pointers on that.
Thanks, Tim. That's brilliant. I'm just sharing my screen again. Okay, Everyone see that?
Yep.
Good. So thanks very much for that, Tim. That was brilliant exercise in seeing how the levers work, actually. So we've introduced everyone now to the levers, and you've kind of seen the impact that small improvements can have on your revenue. The important thing is that it helps you consider whether there are alternative or additional approaches to growing revenue beyond simply generating more leads or focusing all your efforts on new business. As we've mentioned, one of the things that's really, really important and to identify is the potential impacts that pulling each of these 7 levers might have on your revenue. It's also another thing putting marketing plans in place and executing them well enough to turn them into real impact on your revenue too. That's where our marketing directors come in, as Tim said, using the Marketing 360 process to build bespoke plans that help you capture that revenue opportunity. And we've been perfecting this process over the last 7 years. The Marketing 360 is a simple way of breaking down the marketing process. We start with 4 key pillars as shown here: define, find, win, and keep. Defining is knowing what your potential customers look like and what your product and service can do for them. Finding is identifying ways to target them based on their behaviours and habits. Winning is exactly what it says, devising strategies to close sales and to create customers. And keeping is about monitoring customer churn or loss and creating retention activities to remedy it. We map separate marketing activities to each of these 4 pillars, and these 12 activities then in turn cover the marketing process from start to finish. And one of the reasons that marketing is hard to assess is because it involves so many different things, and being able to see all of your marketing activities in one place is the first step to understanding how each of these areas is performing. The 7 levers complement our Marketing 360 approach perfectly, and they focus on the more easily quantifiable aspects of marketing and their contribution to revenue growth. The first 3 levers that we talked about focus around our areas to do with finding and winning customers. And here at the Marketing Centre, we frequently work with businesses on areas such as building a demand generation plan that supports the business objectives and ensures appropriate KPIs are in place for marketing and sales performance. Retention and cross-sell or upsell that we talked about are important components of activity to help retain customers for longer, as well as buy more often and in increased volumes. So often we'll be designing processes and communication programs for customers from initial onboarding right the way through to advocacy. And specific account management plans are also a key area of focus to improve retention. In some businesses, most of the revenue comes down to a very small number of customers. So an account-based approach to marketing can yield spectacular results. Pricing and profit management are one aspect of the retention activity we work hard on with businesses. And knowing what your position is in the marketplace, and depending on how strong your brand is, means you may be able to command a higher price, as Tim was saying with one of the examples, without losing customers too much. Alternatively, you might even look at dropping prices to be more competitive. You could win business from smaller players who are unable to do so, and this also can have a significant impact on positive sales. And as we've seen in the examples, increasing the conversion ratios from response to hot lead and from hot lead to paying customer can also have an impact overall too. During their work with businesses, our marketing directors will typically focus on getting the CRM and other marketing technologies to actually support and add value to the business operation. They'll be aligning the sales and marketing functions so that they have clarity on their respective roles and handoffs, and also clear lead definitions. Also, shortening the overall sales cycle with promotions, training, and other initiatives can all bring efficiencies to the marketing process. And finally, the left-hand side of the Marketing 360 is where we as marketeers explore branding and messaging. And whilst this is less directly quantifiable, it's still vitally important to do this thoroughly, since it's the foundation on which everything else develops and grows. You may say that it's the oil that greases the 7 levers, since it makes more people aware of you, it helps shorten your sales cycle, and strengthening your brand can really protect your margins. So what's next? That's the end of our introduction today to the 7 levers. If you'd like to know more and get an idea of how this might work in your business, then please do feel free to be in touch, and we can have a chat, you know, in a moment. We're happy to offer you a complimentary video session, face-to-face, or whatever is possible, with a marketing director, if you'd like to explore those 7 growth levers for your business. And if you're interested in our 362, please do go online, as we said earlier, and have a go at doing the marketing health check. The link is actually in the chat, but I think we'll probably be sending it later too. You're welcome to stay on now. If we have any more questions, I don't know, Tony, any more questions? You're very welcome to stay and we'll have a chat. And it just remains for me to thank you from myself, Tim, Jed, and the team for taking the time to be with us on the session today.
Cheers, Julie. Let me take the opportunity to again thank Tim, Julie, and Jed for what I thought was an informative session.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yeah, great timing. I had no idea. I didn't even know anyone knew that number. But yeah, so yeah, thanks a lot again for an informative session. I've certainly taken some notes that I've tried to apply in the weeks and months ahead.